Imagine this. It is a Sunday morning in 1955. You walk into a Catholic church anywhere in the world, New York, Paris, or a tiny village in Vietnam. You smell incense. You hear the low rumble of Latin prayers. You see the priest's back, shrouded in heavy vestments, facing an altar illuminated by candlelight. You don't understand every word, but you know exactly what is happening. You are witnessing a ritual that has remained virtually unchanged for 400 years. Now, fast forward just 15 years. It's 1970. You walk into that same church. The high altar is gone. The rails where you used to kneel are gone. The priest is now facing you, speaking in plain English or French or Vietnamese. There are guitars. There is dialogue. The silence is replaced by participation. In the span of a single generation, the Roman Catholic Church performed the most radical, rapid transformation of its central act of worship in 2,000 years. It wasn't just an update, it was an earthquake. This seismic shift created what we now effectively see as the two masses. On one side, the ancient, solemn, traditional Latin Mass. On the other, the modern, familiar Novus Ordo. And this isn't just a history lesson. This is the source of a fierce, passionate, and sometimes painful debate that is tearing through the church right now. Why do we have two versions of the same ritual? What was actually lost, and what was gained when everything changed? To understand the liturgy wars, we have to peel back the layers of history, theology, and psychology to see what is really at stake. To understand why this happened, you have to transport yourself back to the early 1960s. The world was on fire. The sexual revolution, the nuclear age, the collapse of colonialism. Everything was changing, and the Catholic Church felt like a fortress under siege, protecting a ritual that had been codified way back in 1570 by Pope Pius V. This Tridentine Mass was the gold standard of stability. It was the rock. But inside the Vatican, there was a growing anxiety. The bishops looked out at the modern world and worried that the church had become a museum. They feared that the faithful in the pews were becoming, in their words, silent spectators, watching a holy drama, but not really part of it. So from 1962 to 1965, over 2,000 bishops gathered in Rome for the Second Vatican Council. Their mission? Aggiornamento, updating. They wanted to open the windows. In their document, Sacrosanctum Concilium, they called for full, conscious, and active participation. They wanted you to understand the prayers, to respond, to feel the liturgy in your bones. But what happened next went further than many anticipated. A committee called the Concilium, led by controversial figures, didn't just translate the old Mass. They reconstructed it. By 1970, the new missal was rolled out, and the ordinary form became the norm. But the extraordinary form never truly died. And the differences between them? They are staggering. Let's break this down, because the differences are not just about aesthetics. They represent two different ways of viewing God. The first, and most obvious barrier, is language. If you go to a Latin Mass today, you are stepping into a sacred soundscape. The prayers are in Latin, a dead language. And that is exactly the point. It is a language removed from commerce, from politics, from the street. It creates a veil of mystery. You aren't meant to analyze every word. You are meant to drift into the sacred. The Novus Ordo shattered this veil. It introduced the vernacular, the language of the people. The argument was simple. How can you pray if you don't know what you're saying? By switching to English or Spanish, the Church tried to democratize the holy, turning complex theology into immediate, accessible speech. One prioritizes mystery, the other prioritizes comprehension. But the visual shock is even more profound. It's about orientation. In the Old Mass, the priest and the people face the same direction, ad orientem, or towards the east. The priest is the captain of the ship, leading the flock toward the rising sun, toward Christ. He isn't talking to you. He is talking to God for you. It is entirely vertical. In the modern Mass, the priest turns around. He celebrates versus populum, facing the people. the altar becomes a table. The dynamic shifts from a commander leading a charge to a host presiding over a meal. It creates a circle of community, a horizontal connection. This changed the psychological focus of the Mass from a private encounter with the divine to a communal gathering of the faithful. This leads directly to your role in the pew. In the Latin Mass, silence is heavy. It is thick. You participate by internalizing the sacrifice, uniting your heart with the priest's whisper. You might pray the rosary. You might just sit in awe. It is a contemplative, almost monastic experience. The Novus Ordo demanded noise. It introduced the dialogue Mass. You are expected to speak, to sing, to respond. The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. Roles that were once reserved for the ordained, like reading the scriptures or distributing communion, were opened up to lay people. The passive observer became the active participant. Then there is the moment of contact. Holy Communion. In the traditional rite, you kneel. You are vulnerable. You do not touch the host. The priest places it on your tongue. The theology here is tactile. This is the literal body of Christ, so sacred that human hands should not touch it. And the only proper posture is total submission on your knees. The modern Mass changed the body language. The altar rails were ripped out. You stand, you process. And controversially, you can receive in the hand. Standing is the posture of the resurrected, of dignity. Receiving in the hand recalls the early church. But critics argue that when you stop kneeling, you stop believing that it's something special. You start treating it like a snack rather than a miracle. And we can't ignore the soundtrack. The council said Gregorian chant should have pride of place. It is the heartbeat of the Roman Rite, unaccompanied, haunting, timeless. But in the rush to modernize, chant was largely abandoned for hymns, folk music, and guitars. The four-hymn sandwich became the standard in American parishes. The atmosphere shifted from the ethereal courts of heaven to a neighborhood sing-along. One lifts you up out of time. The other grounds you in the present moment. Finally, and perhaps most controversially, they changed the prayers themselves. The Old Mass used the Roman canon, a prayer fixed in stone for centuries, obsessed with the language of sacrifice, victimhood, and atonement. The New Mass introduced options, shorter prayers, streamlined rituals. They cut out the imprecatory psalms and the prayers that emphasized our unworthiness. They vastly expanded the Bible readings to include more Old Testament, which is a net positive for biblical literacy, but the sacrificial edge was softened. They shifted the emphasis from propitiating a holy God to gathering as a holy people. So why does this matter? Why are people fighting about this on Twitter and in parish councils 50 years later? Because it comes down to one fundamental question. What is the Mass for? The traditional Latin Mass screams sacrifice. It is Calvary made present. It is serious, somber, and vertical. The Novus Ordo, while still a sacrifice, emphasizes the banquet. It is the Last Supper. It is a meal shared by friends. It is joyful, communal, and horizontal. For decades, these two forms coexisted uneasily. Pope Benedict XVI tried to broker a peace treaty, calling them two lungs of the same body. But recently, Pope Francis clamped down with Traditionis Custodes, restricting the Old Mass, arguing that it was being used to divide the Church and reject the Council. This reignited the war. For some, the Latin Mass is a refuge of reverence in a chaotic world. For others, it's a nostalgic relic that blocks the Church's progress. Ultimately, this isn't just about Latin versus English. It's about identity. It's about whether we look up to the heavens in silence or look at each other in song. Both are valid. Both are Catholic. But they paint very different pictures of what it means to worship. I want to know where you stand in this. Do you find God in the silence of the old or the community of the new? Let me know in the comments below.